When you tap a smartphone to load funds into a digital wallet, the authentication powering that transaction relies on a very old piece of hardware. Behind almost every modern financial tool, you'll find the overlapping red and yellow circles of a company established more than 50 years ago. A group of cornered bankers forged this infrastructure out of sheer panic in 1966, long before the rise of modern tech centers. To understand why they panicked, we have to look at how money moved in the mid-20th century. Credit cards existed, but they were slow, localized, and required clerks to physically imprint account details onto carbon paper using heavy knucklebuster machines. You couldn't use a local card across the country, and merchants had to check paper lists of bad account numbers by hand. This map of the United States illustrates the core structural hurdle of the 1960s. Legislation known as unit banking laws explicitly prohibited banks from opening branches across state lines. The law effectively forced banks to remain small and geographically isolated within their own states. These regional boundaries prevented almost any single bank from accumulating the capital, merchant relationships, and customer base required to build a unified national credit network. There was, however, one massive exception to this localized banking rule: Bank of America. Operating out of California, they had the scale to successfully launch the Mastercard, the payment network that would eventually become Visa. By 1961, the Mastercard was highly profitable. Bank of America deliberately kept this information secret, allowing negative impressions of early credit cards to linger while they quietly entrenched their network. The secret finally broke in 1966. Marine Midland, a New York bank, realized the potential of the Mastercard and attempted to secure a regional license. Bank of America rejected the request, explicitly stating that Marine Midland was too big to be a licensee. That rejection clarified the situation for the independent banking sector. Bank of America was actively filtering out strong competitors. If the independent banks did not build their own competing network immediately, Bank of America would control the future of consumer payments. In August 1966, Carl H. Hinkey of Marine Midland invited representatives from several competing banks to meet him in Buffalo, New York. The vintage street signs and brick facades of the city capture the setting where these rivals gathered to plan their survival. The banks in the room arrived at a simple conclusion: they could not fight the Bank Americard monopoly individually. To survive, they agreed to pool their resources and form the Interbank Card Association, or ICA. This diagram shows their strategy. While Bank Americard operated on a centralized hub-and-spoke model dominated by a single entity, the ICA was structured as a decentralized, multi-node cooperative governed entirely by member committees. These committees established standardized, shared rules for transaction authorization, clearing, and overnight settlement across all the participating member banks. Eventually, they united their regional offerings under a single national brand name, Mastercard. Distributing power among committees allowed these fierce, highly suspicious competitors to share a single payment infrastructure without surrendering control to one another. Scaling a cooperative network required a rapid shift away from paper. They quickly adopted a new technology invented by IBM, the magnetic stripe. Ironed onto the back of plastic cards, the stripe allowed banks to encode account data that could be read by electronic terminals. To process that data, the ICA developed proprietary computer networks called INAS and BankNet. These mainframe systems allowed issuing banks and merchants to communicate directly with one another, replacing the time-consuming telephone exchanges that had previously bottlenecked retail checkout lines. Armed with a digital clearing system, the network expanded outside the United States. In 1968, they formed an alliance with Banco Nacional in Mexico, and soon after partnered with the Eurocard network across Europe, followed by the first Japanese member banks. By standardizing their digital technology and locking down international alliances, this defensive coalition of U.S. regional banks established a global standard for moving money. Look at this trading floor at the New York Stock Exchange in 2006. That year, facing intense antitrust scrutiny over its cooperative structure, Mastercard executed an initial public offering, officially converting from an association owned by banks into a publicly traded corporation. Freed from the limitations of its cooperative governance, the company scaled. Between its 2006 IPO and 2020, Mastercard's stock price surged over 5,000%, making it one of the best-performing large-cap equities in the United States. But the 2010s brought a new perceived threat, a wave of fintech arrivals. Companies like PayPal, Apple Pay, and eventually cryptocurrency platforms entered the market, promising to make legacy credit card networks obsolete. This diagram illustrates the reality of modern payment systems. Tech startups created smooth, user-friendly digital interfaces, but they could not easily replicate 50 years of regulatory compliance and global clearing networks. Instead of replacing the legacy system, these apps ended up routing their payments directly through Mastercard settlement rails. The 1966 alliance unintentionally created a settlement layer newer tech companies could neither ignore nor replace. 50 years later, the panic of those regional bankers remains the foundation of how most of the world pays for things. Mastercard processes billions of transactions every year, but as physical credit cards reach saturation in many global markets, a company of this scale must find new avenues for growth. Currently, there is an estimated $40 trillion in consumer spending and $80 trillion in business-to-business volume still tied to physical cash, paper checks, and outdated legacy systems. At the same time, emerging technologies like digital currencies, stablecoins, and AI agents have the potential to process transactions directly between parties, removing the need for traditional networks. To capture that undigitized capital and address these technological shifts, Mastercard is replacing its traditional business model with a three-part, self-feeding economic engine. Success in the next era of commerce requires more than switching transactions. It requires a coordinated strategy to turn that volume into intelligence. The first priority focuses on consumer payments. Growth here is driven by offering choice across multiple digital rails, from traditional cards to real-time, account-based transactions. This strategy relies on tokenization. By replacing static 16-digit card numbers with secure, randomized tokens, Mastercard secures digital transactions. This technology now handles 40% of their total volume. Digital-first programs and click-to-pay features further this shift by removing manual data entry, creating a frictionless checkout experience for mobile and online users. They are also building infrastructure for autonomous commerce through Mastercard Agent Pay. This framework allows AI agents to securely execute and verify purchases on a user's behalf across the network. By capturing every digital touchpoint, Mastercard establishes the massive transaction volume needed to power the rest of their corporate strategy. Beyond consumer spending lies the massive world of commercial B2B payments. Millions of dollars still move through slow-moving invoices and manual corporate workflows. Mastercard is addressing this by embedding virtual card technology into major B2B travel and expense platforms. This allows businesses to integrate digital payments into their existing corporate workflows. For global disbursements, they use the Mastercard Move platform. This allows businesses and governments to send funds to consumers and partners worldwide using a single, secure gateway. They have also integrated stablecoins into this platform. This allows for seamless movement between traditional fiat and digital assets within a regulated, compliant framework. Digitizing these heavy B2B workflows brings massive volumes of corporate capital onto the network that traditional credit cards never accessed. The third priority, services and other solutions, is where Mastercard leverages its network visibility to operate as a high-margin data and technology company. These services are monetized transaction data by providing AI-driven fraud scoring and network-level threat intelligence. These tools proactively detect and neutralize cyber attacks before they can impact the broader ecosystem. They are also expanding into digital identity. Verified digital credentials are now used to secure access to financial services and authenticate high-value transactions without the need for physical IDs. Through the Commerce Media Initiative, they use anonymized spend insights to help merchants create personalized, highly targeted advertising networks. These services are the highest margin part of the business, turning raw transaction data into premium products for banks and retailers. These three priorities function as a single, interdependent corporate mechanism, a flywheel. It begins with volume. Consumer and commercial payments bring critical transaction data onto the network. That raw data is fed into AI systems to create the security and intelligence services of the third priority. These services are used to win new customer deals, which in turn drives more consumer and commercial payments, accelerating the entire cycle. This self-feeding ecosystem built a structural advantage, making the network more efficient with every new transaction. Looking toward 2026, Mastercard is positioning this flywheel to support trends like instant cross-border economies and verified digital identity wallets. The network is also adapting to reward sustainable consumer choices, enabling new models for the circular economy. These frictionless digital experiences require a massive, securely governed infrastructure to function. By integrating these services directly into its core, Mastercard is building a long-term defense against both traditional competitors and new fintech players. Mastercard is now the technical infrastructure underneath global commerce, managing how value is exchanged in an increasingly digital world.